welcome to Next. I'm Chris Corde. I'm the Director of Product for Security Operations here at Google Cloud. I'm here to talk to you about securing your or transforming your security operations and incident response portfolio with Google and Mandiant. So obviously we recently welcomed Mandiant into the family, and I think it allows us together with the Chronicle platform to really do some major differentiating things, and here to give you a little bit of deep dive in how those things are going to come together. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just set the stage a little bit with really what we're seeing as the perfect cybersecurity storm for a lot of our customers. And a lot of this is exacerbated just by these three trends that are just continuing to grow. And the first is just the threat landscape, the increasing threat actor landscape. So back 12 years ago when I worked at RSA Security, we were subjected to really one of the first nation state attacks of its kind when an attacker attempted and was successful in getting access to the security token seeds. And they did this to get access really to US critical infrastructure. They were looking to steal a set of IP from the US government, and feeling like they can get access to the token seeds was a good way of doing that. So that was an example of a pretty sophisticated nation state attack. Unfortunately, these nation state attackers have only increased their their purview on what they're willing to attack, and in many cases have pivoted to not just looking at IP-based threat and attacks and going after only very sophisticated customers like government, but instead of really expanded into things like e-crime, things like ransomware, other activity like that. And that's just expanded the addressable surface of organizations that they're willing and able to attack. So we've seen attacks on areas like healthcare, areas like education, and a lot of that's just financially motivated e-crime level attacks. And you've seen a lot of that in the news through things like ransomware. So what that really does is it just, unfortunately makes every organization potentially susceptible to not just an attacker, but in some cases a very sophisticated attacker, right? Because you're dealing with nation state attackers who are well-funded, who have a large degree of expertise, and quite frankly, just have a lot of experience in what works in attacking organizations. So that's just, unfortunately, really exacerbating what customers have to deal with and have to defend. But on top of that, you're dealing with rising complexity in your own IT infrastructure. Just things like movement into cloud, things like work from home, all create an expansive attack surface that creates an increasing complexity, right? The more that you can control your attack surface and keep it a relatively hardened, small, narrow set of things you have to protect, the easier it is. But unfortunately, that's just not reality in today's environment. And it's just going to increasingly get worse, right? So when you combine that with the notion of increased attacker activity, and then unfortunately layer in the thing on the bottom, which is the cybersecurity skill set gap, things just start to really spiral out of control, right? So it would be bad enough if these only top two trends were the things you had to deal with, but even when you want to go out and transform your own security portfolio or your own security team internally, if you can't get access to the best people just because there are not enough of them, it just creates and makes things even worse. So you really have to start putting onus and emphasis on your vendors to kind of help you through this. To number one, bring a level of expertise to the equation, but also to help you through things like a skill set gap, right? And that's where we think a lot of what Mandiant helps bring to the table can really help our customers through these increasing trends, because it just allows them to deal with things both on the product side and on the people side. So we start by just having what we're layering in together inside of Google as really the best security operations platform in the industry. And it's a combination of these four things. So we've started with Google Chronicle SIEM, which we'll talk about some more, but is really a cloud native SIEM that specializes in handling data at scale and allowing access to searching and managing that data really at Google speeds. But then recently, in December of last year, we acquired Simplify SOAR, which is security orchestration and response. And what that has allowed us to do is just, create and deliver that last mile of security operations workflow to help our customers do things like case management and orchestration and response at scale on top of what we're delivering with Chronicle. So here at Google Next, we announced the security operations portfolio. We've integrated in SIEM and SOAR into one Chronicle platform, and we're super excited about how those things will come together and work in the future. But then we also layer in really world-class threat intelligence from our internal team, which is our Google Cloud Threat Intel team, as well as the VirusTotal team. And in both of those cases, we're dealing with signal that we can gather through billions of entries and billions of users that we protect. So on the Google side, we have frontline intelligence that we're gathering through, the billions of users that we manage and maintain and protect on a daily basis. And with VirusTotal, it's the world's preeminent malware and URL reputation database, and it has, I think over 2.4 billion entries inside the VT database now. So you're just dealing with a pretty wide set of threat intelligence that we can layer into the platform. And then as we pull Mandiant in, it just takes all of this to the next level. So Mandiant has over 800 security and intelligence analysts that are operating in the trenches on the front lines of security incidents every single day. So they're the world's leading incident response provider. The first person that we called when we were subjected to the RSA breach years ago was Mandiant. So just that capability alone helps, expand what we're able to do inside of Google to the next level. But then on top of that, Mandiant helps bring a lot of, products into the equation that really, are built off of the expertise that they're able to deliver through their incident response services. So take, for example, security validation. That actually allows customers to, go through a set of testing to validate that their security controls are working as designed. And obviously, the more you know about the threat actors, and the more you know about what threat actors are willing to do, the better off you are in validating that your controls will protect against those types of attacks. So it's really the combination of this, world-class incident response team, as well as a set of products that Mandiant integrates in, combined with the Google security operations portfolio with Chronicle. As these two things come together, we think it creates a super powerful combination to really help our customers at all layers in the stack, and ultimately even help them in situations where they don't have the people to operate their environments in the first place. So we think it kind of delivers all in these 6 major differentiators, and I'll talk about each one of these in depth. But the first one is cloud scale data, but it's really cloud scale data at your fingertips, being able to search and manage that data at sub-second response times. But then it's layering in frontline intelligence, but then providing the right automated response, contextual awareness, and then in worst case scenarios, having access to unparalleled expertise from our internal threat experts and incident response services that we can now deliver inside of Google and Mandiant. So what I'll do is I'll walk through each one of these in a little bit of depth, just to give you a little bit of color on each one. But then obviously there'll be other ways that you can learn more as we go through at the end of the conversation. So the first thing is just having access to cloud scale data. So that at the end of the day, security is now a big data problem. We're dealing with environments that sometimes scale up to 20, 30 petabytes a year for our customers. And when you're dealing with that large of a data volume, handling it with traditional tools like on-premises SIEMs is just an untenable exercise. You just cannot continue to do it anymore. So I've talked to customers who are, in some cases, managing hundreds of servers, over 500 servers in their own on-prem environments for just their SIEM. And when you have to do that, you're basically using a lot of your precious people, your precious security people, as just people managing infrastructure at scale, instead of performing more advanced, sophisticated security workflow like incident response and investigation. So the first thing we want to be able to do with Chronicle is just take that equation out and just allow you to handle data at scale in a cloud native platform, and really allow you to do it in a situation where you don't have to filter any data coming into the system. You don't have to make filtering decisions either based on scale, or you don't have to make filtering decisions based on cost. Out of the box, we provide 12 months of hot retention in Chronicle. And what that means is basically you can, search, investigate, run rules, run detections across 12 months of data by default inside of Chronicle. In most other platforms, they're not even coming close to 12 months of hot retention. In a lot of endpoint detection and response platforms, you're getting maybe 30 days of hot retention. So this just, obviously the more information that you're able to use to create context, the better off you are in performing investigation and detection. So we think that's a major differentiator on what Chronicle can bring to the table. But then in all of this, we do this with disruptive economics, right? So because we are a cloud provider ourselves, because we have access to, large scale infrastructure as a cloud provider, we can just deliver this to you with economics that really cannot be matched by others in the industry. Mostly because they have to build their products on top of public cloud systems that they have to effectively pay market rate for. And because of that, that cost gets eventually passed on to customers. So when you take all this together, we actually, right out of the gate, provide you with just a more scalable security data platform to deliver and handle your job than any other vendor in the industry. But not only that, you want to make use of that data, right? You can't really make use of information unless you can actually search through it, investigate it, and manage it. So the one thing that Google brings to the table is really rooted in our, legacy, is the ability of having sub-second search and sub-second response times. So we can search across those petabytes of information very quickly, but then not only search on it, but we can also provide you that information with the right layered context and layered intelligence, right? So you don't just want raw pieces of information. You want information that tells you or gives you some indication that you need to look at this more closely, or that it may potentially be malicious. So take, for example, VirusTotal. Every time we have an event in Chronicle that either is associated with a file hash or a URL, we layer in VirusTotal enrichment so that you can actually see what potentially is malicious or what has high reputation, and allows you to focus your investigations a little bit more closely. So it's giving you this large scale data, but giving it to you at your fingertips with the right level of enrichment and contextual visualization that you need. But then this feeds a little bit into, how I actually bring intelligence to the table. So if it was just raw data and just raw data at speed, you could potentially use just a data lake for that. You may not need a specific security product for that problem. So in this case, we want not just to give you access to the data, but give you access to the data with embedded intelligence in it. And like I was mentioning before, when you combine VirusTotal with what we see with Google Cloud Threat Intel, but then you layer in the Mandiant threat intelligence, which is really the frontline threat actor-based intelligence, you're effectively getting, in my opinion, the most comprehensive set of threat intel inside of any security product in the world. And so we package that up either in the form of direct IOC feeds so that you can, overlay all of the information in Chronicle with this threat intelligence, but we also deliver that in the form of what we call curated detections, which are basically built-in detections and analytics so that, something like ransomware, for example, you just flip a switch inside of Chronicle and we immediately start doing ransomware detection on your behalf. And those detections are managed, maintained, handled by our backend Google Cloud Threat Intel team. So it just makes your life a lot easier when you don't have to build a bunch of this frontline threat intelligence and frontline detection capability yourself. And instead you can leverage that from us out of the box. And then you can focus your people on doing the more sophisticated or more direct, organizationally focused, detections that you want to layer into the system. So every time you have a detection, anytime you have a signal that you need to handle, you need to be able to respond to that in some way, shape, or form. And the more signal that you have, and the more information you're trying to process, in many cases, the more actions your people have to perform, which again is not scalable. If you're having trouble getting people into the system and actually, being part of your security operations program, you just can't keep hiring over and over and over again to handle more data. So what you really need is you need some way of automating responses. You need some way of triaging out noise in the system. You need some way of scaling your people. And you can do that through things like ready playbooks. You can do things like, take repeatable use cases. You can do things like providing automated enrichment and automated triage. So all of these things are really what Simplify brought to the table. And actually Simplify now, combined with the Mandiant automated defense capability, allows us to build a lot of these response playbooks directly in from the start. So when you take something like a ransomware attack or a phishing attack, What Simplify has is a set of playbooks, a set of use cases that are associated with that attack. They're either developed by Simplify or actually developed by the community. And when you combine those things together, it just allows you to handle a lot more of those events at scale, and in many cases get just a higher degree of efficiency out of your existing people, and also, quite frankly, be more responsive to threats which are occurring in your environment. And both of those things are quite important when you're trying to deal with the trends that we talked about before. And then the fifth thing is around contextual awareness. And, I think this is one of the most overlooked areas of security operations, which is like you're dealing with a lot of these events and a lot of these signals, and you're looking for threats, and all that's good. But if you can't put threats in context, or you can't associate what a event with how much risk it poses to your environment, it's very hard to make sense out of it. So the more that you can bring context into the equation, the better off you are. So what Mandiant helps us do now is, with two products, attack surface management and with security validation, it just allows us to deliver more contextual awareness, so that you understand what an attacker may actually get access to. So attack surface management allows you to really be able to monitor assets and see things from an attacker's perspective, so that you know which assets are exposed. And then security validation allows you to look at the effectiveness of your security controls internally. And the more that you don't have the right controls in place to protect against the common attack techniques that Mandiant sees on a day-to-day basis, the more that we can tell you that you have a potentially risky setup or risky environment. And we can do that before you're subjected to an attack, which is a pretty important data point when you're trying to deal with an incident in real time. So when you take the layered data approach that we have with threat intelligence, and then layer in this contextual awareness, we think it takes it to a whole nother level where you can actually extend beyond just what traditional SIEMs would do on a day-to-day basis. And then the last piece is just helping you with unparalleled expertise. So we talked about in the beginning an ability to have the right people in your system. And the reality is, almost every organization is going to lack the right resources to be able to handle these types of things at scale. So what we want to be able to do is give you access to that expertise. We want to be able to give you access to that expertise either in I'll call it a managed prevention or managed detection scenario, or potentially give you access to that expertise through Mandiant's world-class incident response services. So we can do that, not only when you're in an incident, but also in a proactive sense. If you're trying to do things like transform your own security operations, Mandiant has a great set of consulting capability to help you do that. And we've also, we've driven some of this through the Google autonomic security operations framework. But with Mandiant now, we can really transform and create that into a programmatized way. So just a few ways to get started, if this is interesting to you. The first is, with Mandiant services, which I talked about. They don't have to be incident services. They can be advisory services. The second could be products inside the Google Cloud Marketplace, which are now all Mandiant products are listed there, or products like Chronicle. And then the third is through our autonomic security operations assessment, which again is our way of helping you create a transformative security operations journey. So I hope this was informative and a good way of giving additional information about what we're doing with Chronicle and Mandiant together. And hopefully a lot of these things will help you secure your enterprises in the future. Thank you.